So, we need to find a brown that will match these little lighter sections right here, actually. Well, first off, I missed this little section here, and that's gonna happen often. You're gonna look back at it and you're gonna realize that you missed a square or two here and there. So it's always good to, that's why you wanna keep this little second pile so that you can easily go and grab the colors that you need. So we're gonna test around and see what color will work best in that little corner there. And you know, so far this one isn't too bad, but to make sure that there isn't anything that might work just a tad bit better. And actually, you know what, come to think of it, I think our best option is just going to be going with the light brown here and just shading those in. So we'll do that really quick. Alright, so something to note is with this last one, you know, we were not able to get the color right on the dot, and you know, for the most part that's okay. It's just you should do your best to try to find the color that matches it the best, and if you can't find the color that matches the best, then it's sometimes better to go and blend. Now if you have to blend, just keep a note of proper blending techniques. I am not really aware of those, so do not take my really advice about it. Moving on, we see right here there are these two little light colored patches that I think are supposed to resemble his hands. We're going to want to keep in mind is this same flesh tone is the same flesh tone as up here, so we're going to need two different fleshy tones to fill in his face and his hands. We have this peach color right here, which is always a very good skin tone. Now we also have a sand color. Okay, so we found our two colors here. So this is a tan and this is a sand colored pencil, and this is going to work well for us with our fleshy colors. So let's fill in those hands. Again, it's pretty easy to do this because you have the dark borders on the sides to help you fill that in without having to worry about making any noticeable errors. So now we need to find a color that roughly matches. Oh, you know what? I just missed another thing. So we need to bring back out our silver. Again, I told you this happens relatively frequently where you notice where you missed adding some colors. So we need to add some gray along right here. Yeah, so we're going to switch some of the colors around, and it's important to keep in mind that once you decide on a color beforehand, you can switch it if you need to. Try not to switch colors midway through the drawing process after you've already drawn with it. But if it's before you've drawn with it, there's no problem with switching around what you had planned on doing. So we're going to take this sand colored pencil and we're going to color in these lighter areas for his clothing. Alright, so now the clothing is out of the way. So, something to note is a reason why it's often better to use colored pencil over another coloring utensil like a marker is, as you can see with this, is there is a little bit of bleeding from the other colors, but for the most part you can color over something and the color will not carry with it if you transfer to another surface. Thus you can really get a very clean fill in between each color without having to worry about any color transfer. Alright, so next we're going to go in and we're going to fill in part of his tunic. Now, there are some very, very minute differences in color in the tunic, and so sometimes when that happens, you need to just kind of pay attention to, one, what colors you have available, and two, if it's really worth it to go and try to shade those. So we are going to go with a light blue color to fill in his tunic here. So we're going to go and run through that really quick and see if we want to do any shading. Now, some of you may have noticed that instead of using dots, I was using lines to indicate which squares need to be colored, and that you can do either or. Personally, I would say when you're doing the outline, stick to the dots because they're cleaner and easier to read. But when you're doing these fill-in spaces like this, it's sometimes okay to use lines. They're quicker to put down, but they're less easy to read and can often lead to mistakes, and that did happen right here. That is not supposed to be colored in yet because that is supposed to be a darker blue, but at least it is meant to be darker rather than lighter, so we are in an okay spot and do not have to pull out an eraser. And as most people probably know, trying to erase colored pencil is a rather difficult task. Alright, so moving on, we need to go and touch up with some of our browns here. We can clearly see that there is a brown strip running up as the sash, so we are going to go and fill those in now. Alright, so our little sash is done now. Now you may have noticed that I went through and made the dots with all 4 different colors. If you're confident in your seeing ability of seeing the different shades of color with those tiny dots, then I would say yes, or if it's a situation where it is a clear indication of light to darker, then I would say you're fine. Okay, so now that we have the whole body for the most part is done, we need to find a color that can match this right there. So I think we're gonna go with this color to put right here. So let's go and color that in really quick. Okay, so set that to the side. So as you can see right here on our example, there is a white strip there. Now obviously you do not need to color in white space on here. I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could take the white, and if you really wanted to just, it really doesn't do anything. So now we are on to his face here. So we're gonna save the hair for last because the hair is a lot of very similar coloring, and that can be kind of tricky at times. Before we start coloring in the skin on his face, we're going to go into his eyes. It seems like his eyes are just black and white, so we're going to go and fill in those really carefully. Because the area around the eye is very light, you want to be extra careful to not go over into any other squares. So it's especially important right now to try to be as careful as you can when coloring in these tricky areas. Now that we have our dots placed, let's go and fill in the eyes. Okay guys, so now that the eyes are colored in, I did happen to make a tiny little mistake. I colored the right eye in first rather than the left eye, at least from our perspective, and because of that, my hand was resting over that eye while I was doing this one, and I happened to smudge it a little bit. So what we're going to do about that is we're going to take just a regular pencil, and sometimes you can go through and you can lighten up any sort of smudging that might happen around your colors. If that even doesn't work, you can always go in with a white and you can kind of color over the things. There's a couple options. If it's really bad, you can always take white out and use that as a kind of last resort option, and then even color over the white out, or just leave it how it is if it was meant to be white. So now we're going to take our 2 skin colored pencils that we have already picked out, and we are going to color in the rest of his face. So alright, so we can see here that Link is actually really starting to come together now. All we have left to do is his hair. So everything else has been completely done, and typically the hair is the hardest part to do because the colors are so similar. Oftentimes finding colors that match can be relatively difficult, as there are 1, 2, 3 3 different shades of light orange coloration in here. So finding colors to match that can be relatively difficult, but we should be okay. Actually, I think I see a 4th one here at the top that is a little bit of a darker yellow. So let's try to match these colors the best that we can. So what I like to do is I like to get all of the similar colors together, the ones that the color range that we're looking for. So we're gonna go through with our golden yellow here, and we're going to fill in the highlights on Link's hair. Alright, so we've gone through with our highlights, and now, because we are going to be using the same color twice, it is important that we can't do the darker color first. We need to do the lighter one first and then shade it in white so that we can fill in the rest without shading in white, because if you were to fill in the dark one and then do the light one, it'd be pretty hard to track which squares you need to color in. So we're going to go through with our yellow here, and we're going to fill in these very light spaces. You probably cannot see it. There's some lighter spaces on here that we're going to fill in with our yellow, and then we're going to go over it with the white and then come back after that and fill in the rest of the hair. Alright, so now that we've gone over with our white, all that's left is our last color, which is going to be going back over with our regular yellow to fill in these empty spaces, and then our drawing will finally be completed. So let's go and run through that really quick. Alright, and there we have it. I think that this drawing turned out pretty well. So, now that we're done, so we have 2 options. We can either leave it on this paper, or we can go the route of cutting it out. Now, typically I like to cut mine out. You can leave it like this, either leave it plain, or you can go and draw in your own background, however you want to work it. But to just show you guys, I'm going to show you guys what I do to cut out my drawings. I have an old grid paper notebook that I have here. It's actually even the same brand. So what we're going to do with this is, you do not need to necessarily have the, a old notebook. Basically what I would say is any sort of hard cardboard surface will work just fine. Essentially what we're gonna do is, I have this little tiny miniature box cutter. What we're going to do with this is we're going to run along the edges and we're going to cut out our drawing with it. Now, you do not need to use a box cut or a mini box cutter. You can use any box cutter, an X-Acto knife, anything that will be able to cut through the paper and is relatively small so that you can cut into the corners pretty well. Scissors could do the trick, but it's going to be a little bit harder with scissors to maneuver into these tight gaps, so that is why I use a box cutter or an X-Acto knife. Now, when it comes to the surface that you're cutting on, obviously do not cut on a wooden table or anything of which that the blade will cut into that you care about. So that is why I use this hard cardboard surface, so that if we cut into it, I do not care, as it is just a piece of cardboard. So I'm going to show you guys. We're just going to go through here really quick. Essentially, what you want to try to do is you want to try to do this with as steady hands as you can, and you want to try follow the lines as best as you can. Now, obviously, if you go over into white space, there's no problem with that. Just try not to cut into the drawing itself. What I typically do is I put my finger on the edge right here like this, and this kind of helps me guide the knife in a straight path. And as you can see, that corner split. Alright, so I'm gonna go and run through here really quick, and hopefully the cut comes out pretty clean. Okay, so something that I just remembered, one easy trick to kind of help expedite the process is sometimes good to just go and do all of your cuts one way and then go back and do all of your cuts the other way to avoid having to move your hands and move the paper too much. So if you do all of your cuts across the paper first, it's going to make it a little easier, or even if you flip it over and cut this way, whatever way is more comfortable. But I find it easier to sometimes do that instead of going and cutting around each corner. It's really up to your preference, but that is what I find easiest to do. It's good to go over on your cuts into the white space, because that's going to leave you with more room when it comes to making the cuts, that they'll overlap and you won't have little pieces of paper that will keep your drawing in place onto the outside of the paper. Alright guys, so the camera cut out there for a second. I did finish going around and cutting this out. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and pull this out. Now, a lot of times what will happen is in these corners, the paper will stick, and that's not really an issue. You just have to be kind of careful with pulling it away from the drawing, not to rip it. As you can see, it easily pulled away just like that. Alright guys, so here is our finished product of our Breath of the Wild Pixel Link. Yes, he's looking pretty good. He's about 3/4 the size of a regular printer sheet of paper. Turned out pretty well, I'd say. Just so you guys know, a lot of people ask me where I find the images to make the pixel art, and there's a couple places. My favorite place to look is DeviantArt, and on there, keywords to search for are pixel, 8-bit, or sprites. Sprites sometimes are a little iffy because they can be really tiny. Nonetheless, that is a great resource. Google Images works sometimes too. Just search Zelda Pixel and then a whole bunch of stuff will pop up and you can get more specific if you want to. Anyways, I hope you guys found this useful, and I hope that at least something that I told you guys will help you guys with making your own pixel art. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you found it helpful. Feel free to tell me down in the comments below any ideas that you have for me to do involving pixel art. If you guys think you have a good idea, please let me know. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.